I don't hear the
Okay,
music. You hear the music?
I don't hear the music. Oh,
What?
now we hear that. Uh,
Our
yes,
music's gone.
I
I
don't know
wonder
what
if they took
happened.
our music away.
I
Huh.
don't know who would take it away. Anyway,
Wow.
welcome to the episode of the Shaker Heights this Sunday, the 24th of November. Yes, our house band went on Thanksgiving vacation. So we're coming to you live a cappella. Um, Thank you for joining us today. Our special guest hails from the Green Road Rapid Stop.
There we go.
Um, he is like the Shaker Oracle. He is like the Bard of Shaker. Dr. David Udelf knows everybody. Incredible memory, like an elephant. I'd like to bring to the stage Dr. David Udelf, the Shaker Oracle.
Oh my God, Shaker Oracle. Are you kidding? Am I centered? Can everybody see me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
Oh
thank
man,
you.
welcome.
It's been a long time.
Yes, it has.
And it's hard to believe that I actually, I worked, a lot of you folks knew me from working in the school. Some knew me when I was going to school there. Some still know me.
Yeah.
But it's been, I can't believe it, 41 years since I left the Shaker schools. Hard to
Wow.
believe.
Wow.
Yep, 41 years.
But what makes that also kind of cool, I mean, when you tack on the fact that you grew up there,
Yep.
so like that added dimension to that. So let's start with that. What brought you to the Shaker community, you and your family, and this.
Well, I don't know. I was born in Shaker, so I don't know. I was already there.
Okay.
In 19, well, I'm not going to give you the year. I don't want anybody doing the age math on this. Okay, no age math here.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah.
People always run into me, by the way, and they say, "Oh my God, you look great. You haven't changed at all." And then I tell them, "Well, that means one of two things. I either look great now, or I look like complete shit 50 years ago."
No.
Oh,
You
am
could
I
have
supposed
grown.
to?
Oh yeah,
I'm
you can
not.
curse. Yeah, like hey,
Yeah,
Oh,
you
I
the
can
can
George
curse.
Carlin rules. Yeah, like all the
Okay.
swear words and everything. Yeah.
Okay.
So
No George Carlin words. Okay.
no. George Carlin
So
words.
I was
Yeah.
born and raised in Shaker. I went to Lomond Elementary School through first
Hey.
grade. When who was the principal then? Mr. Abraham, that probably nobody remembers.
Mm. I went to
And
Ludlow.
he was there in the 50s. And then, just sharing, just going to be totally transparent about my life. I had a sister that died when I was 5 years old. And I've still got the gift that she gave me for the holidays that year. Still got it.
Man.
Should have brought it with me, but my family needed to get out of that house. It was a tragic set of circumstances. So in February of 1959, we moved to South Woodland, out near Beechwood, between Sulgrave and Green Road. And then I started going to Mercer Elementary School. Alice Van Dusen was the principal there. I got to tell you one thing, reflecting back on my education days there, I got to tell you, the educators in Shaker back then were just incredible.
Mm.
I mean, just amazing. One of the things I learned from Alice Van Dusen knew everybody's name.
Wow.
She could, she'd see you 10, 20 years ago. She'd remember your name. She'd remember your family's names. And that's something that stuck with me. It's something I always tried to do, remembering names and faces, and got pretty good at it. I got a pretty good memory with names and faces. And so that's something that really stuck with me, the personal approach that she used and other Shaker education. I have such fond memories of my teachers
Mm-hmm.
at Lomond, at Mercer, at Byron, at the high school. I can remember them. I can remember stories about them and everything. So, yeah, great days growing up. And I think I really benefited from a great education.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What was Thornton Park still around at that time? Or,
Thornton Park didn't open until the early 1960s.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And by the way, I was at Byron Junior High School the day it opened
Mm.
Wow.
because my sister was in the first graduating class at Byron.
Wow.
And she was in a musical. They opened it up. They had an opening night where she was in a musical. And so I remember going in. I just remember going in there the day that it opened. I couldn't tell you the exact year. It was in the, I want to say the late 1950s, early 60s. And so I was there.
Wow. And I can imagine
Thornton didn't open up. And what's that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say at that time, that building design must have been pretty, pretty modern or au courant for Shaker, right? That modern building that was Byron.
Oh, yeah. It broke the mold. Shaker, most of the buildings are in a Georgian style, or, kind of red brick. And Byron totally broke the mold. And it was pretty cool back then, although now it's not very energy efficient. And of course, I don't know how many people out there know that, but Byron's going to be going away pretty soon in the next few years. Going to be, according to plans, going to be torn down. And it's going through its last few years. The entire middle school, all the middle school kids are back over at Byron for now because Woodbury is being rehabbed and will be the middle school for 6th through 8th graders. I don't know what the timeline is. I'm believing 2 or 3 years from now.
Okay. Are there any plans with the high school after that to remodel the high school?
I wish there was. There may be. I'm not aware of it. It's not in great shape. The infrastructure is bad. I wish they would do something like what Cleveland Heights did. Cleveland Heights did a beautiful job of remodeling and restoring the original integrity of that building.
Yeah.
The high school is just sort of lots of band-aids and Elmer's glued together, and not, they need that place needs some significant work.
Yeah.
Speaking of the high school, what was your high school experience like?
Well, all kinds of memories from that. So many things happened. I can remember. Here's an unusual. I was kind of a quiet, introverted sort of a person my early years in high school, and then things started to happen. One of the things that happened was I had an English teacher, Mrs. Lowe, who was one of the first Black teachers at the high school, who all my other teachers used to get all caught up in my English papers would come back covered with red ink. It actually looked like the teacher to slit their wrists on my papers and bled to death on them. But Mrs. Lowe got past that and inspired me. She said, you're a really good writer. Your content is great. And she inspired me. I wrote a paper about sports, and she inspired me, said I was a good writer, and inspired me to try to write for the Shakerite, which I followed up on the year after. Now, here's a weird small world story. This happened about a year ago. I was talking to some neighbors. Turned out that Mrs. Lowe was their great aunt.
Oh, wow.
And they called her on the phone and put me on the line. And I told her how much she meant to my life. She was a real change point for me. Mm-hmm. Because somebody had finally said, hey, you've got some ability here. And it caused me to start to believe in myself in terms of a skill. Mm-hmm. I thanked her. She was crying on the other end of the phone. She was so grateful.
Oh,
And then she died 3 weeks later,
oh man, that was timely. That was
which
timely.
really hit me between the eyes. But I'm so glad I was able to
Yes.
share the gratitude to her. So yeah, Mrs.
Oh
Lowe.
man, what a
And
beautiful
so
moment.
grateful that I had an opportunity to touch base with her and just let her know, and to give her the satisfaction of, I don't know how many students she really ever heard from, but I made sure I did that. So that was really a great thing.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
another, and this is an interesting moment in Shaker, that some of you may or may not be aware of, but when I was a sophomore at Shaker, I believe I was a sophomore. I think it was, I was home and I was after school around 5:30. I was all the way down on South Woodland, about as far away from the high school as you could get and still be in Shaker.
Mhm.
And my room shook a little bit. It was like my stereo speakers shook, and I what the heck?
You know where you're going.
And I didn't know what it was. And then my dad got home. We turned on the TV, and Walter Cronkite comes on the national news. And the lead story, there was a big map of Ohio on the screen and a star with Shaker Heights written on it. And my family was like, what? And the next thing they know, they showed video of the Shaker Heights Police Department that had been blowing up to bits. And I was in shock.
Yeah.
We couldn't believe it. I called friends after dinner. We drove down there. You couldn't get anywhere near the police station. We walked over. Lee Road was covered with bricks. The police
Man.
station had been totally leveled. Totally leveled. And the roof was at a slant. The roof was at an angle, one side of the roof on the ground. There were police cars, fire engines from all surrounding communities. It had been blown up. Miraculously, no one in the building died.
Oh, that's good.
Hmm.
That's good. Yeah.
Nobody got
Wasn't it?
killed
Wasn't it a
except
kid that set it off? Did a kid set that off, or?
he was a guy. I'm not going to mention names. I know the name. I'm not going to mention it. I don't want to get into that. He was out of high school, was very irate. He set a bomb in a package and was carrying into the police station. He made what turned out to be very fatal mistake. It was a radio controlled bomb.
Yeah. Command.
He accidentally put it on the same frequency as the police radio.
Oh.
When the police frequency radio came through, it blew the package up. He was holding it,
Mm.
and it blew him to bits.
Wow. How
And
the heck did he learn how to build that thing? I mean, I
That's
could
a-
see it today.
I don't know. That's unknown. They did not know who did it. They had no idea. There was a car in the parking lot covered with debris. Later, a student from Shaker, I'm not going to mention his name, was helping go through the debris. He actually found a piece of skull with hair on it,
Mm.
and they matched it with the hair on a brush from the suspect. There was a suspect because the car of the perpetrator was parked in there. And by the way, in the car, he had plans. He was going to blow up the high school next.
Wow.
And he had also, before getting to the police station, which was now across the street, it was right next to the City Hall, right across the street where the current police station is. This guy also had it in for his psychiatrist who lived on Fernway, and shot his psychiatrist before going to the police station to blow it up.
Whoa.
Okay. And that guy lived too, the psychiatrist. Everybody lived, including Judge Rocker. You guys might remember the Rocker family. Their kids, I think, might have been your age at Shaker. But he lived through it. No one died except for the suspect. And yeah, it was.
Shaker had real shit going on.
So perspective-wise,
that was the reason I mentioned that. That was a very, very memorable moment in my life. So
I remember you being, well, perspective is different, especially when I was 12 years old and I knew you. How were you about 6'4"? I was thinking, I was wondering what. I always knew you. You knew all the athletes, the us that played baseball and everything. Are you 6'4"? And what sports did you play? Were you on?
Well, I was not the most athletic person. My desk is faster than I was. And I actually take pride in that. I am the slowest non-handicapped person I've ever met, and I'm very proud of that.
Are you 6'4"? We shrink, so
6'7".
Oh, geez. Wow. Okay. So you were tall.
Yeah. Never played a varsity sport at Shaker, but was always very involved. Covered the teams for the Shakerite, the hockey team, which, by the way, that was another very influential moment. I was one of the founders of the Shaker Heights high school hockey team.
Really?
And actually was inducted in the Shaker Hockey Hall of Fame a year ago in June.
All right.
How did you help find it? How does one help find a hockey team?
Well, what happened was, and this is an interesting thing because myself and other members of the Shaker hockey team, so I was involved because a couple of my friends played hockey, Mike Corcoran, Art Vance, and we got very involved and we did all the leg room. I mean, now kids are spoon-fed their sport.
Yeah.
Okay. We raised money. We went out and found the coaches. I was printing programs, printing game programs to sell at Thornton to raise money. Did all this, got us on TV. That was my role. I was sort of the marketing guy. We had game videos on TV, on the news. I developed a personal relationship with Gib Shanley, Nev Chandler.
Okay.
Yeah, they were really helpful to us. I would call them with the scores. They would send out, it was unbelievable. Okay. And by the way, this is something really interesting. There was a guy, and I didn't realize this until a couple of years ago. There was a little kid in the 4th grade that was selling programs for me. And I never put 2 and 2 together until 2 years ago. The kid who was in the 4th grade and had to be the first job he ever had went on to become president of Goldman Sachs and our national economic advisor under President Trump, Gary Cohn. Gary grew up in Shaker, played hockey at Thornton, graduated from Gilmore Academy, and of course went on to all kinds of fame and fortune, mostly fortune. And so there you go. National economic advisor selling hockey programs at Thornton Park.
So he's probably giving his money to Gilmore instead of Shaker.
Yeah, well, I'll have to see about that.
Yeah, I got to change that up. Hey, real quick about the police station. The irony was that, Mr. Asamoto, the late Mr. Asamoto, Keith Asamoto's dad, was the architect of the new police station.
Did not know that. That's there you go.
Yeah, he had an office right near Baskin Robbins up there at Lee Road, Asamoto and Associates.
I never knew he was an architect. I didn't know that. And you guys know the story, but I was coaching, and a lot of people in Shaker know me because I coached baseball for 180 years and actually still doing that, believe it or not.
Oh, great.
And I'm coaching high school baseball someplace, which probably people aren't going to want to hear about, but I'll share that in a little bit. But we had just completed a game. I had just coached a game up at the high school. It was a Saturday afternoon, and we walked over to watch a game that was going in Woodbury, and Mr. Asamoto, Coach Asamoto, was standing right next to me. We're talking, and he collapsed. And that's when he had his fatal heart attack, standing right next to me. And I can still see it, and I could still see the parents. They cleared the field. The parents just yanked their kids off the field. They went home. The rest of the game was canceled that we were watching, and what a tragic moment that was.
Yeah, man, truly. And
Yep.
gone too soon. I mean, the impact that Mr. Asamoto had on so many people, it's just amazing, So shout out to the Asamotos, Keith and Diane and Joyce, Miss Asamoto and Craig, that whole family, man. They live down the street from Greg Fuller and I. They lived on Ashwood.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Right. There was a dog running around, and I thought the dog belonged to them for some reason. I brought the dog home, finally called the family, and they said, we don't have a dog. So I don't know whose dog I had that whole time. So
wow.
I thought I was doing them a favor.
Right.
It seemed like the dog belonged to him, and in any rate, kind of a strange side story there.
Yeah, no. Wow.
How about college?
Yeah.
College.
Yeah, where did you go?
Where did you graduate, and how did you do?
I graduated. I graduated from Shaker in 71, attended Miami University, which was also a huge part of my life. And I tell stories about that all day long. But graduated in 75, got my master's degree from there in 1977, got my doctorate at the University of Denver, graduated from there in 87, did my residency at the University of Tennessee Medical School. So that's my whole post high school education career.
Were you intermittently involved with Shaker? Because I know you were involved. Well, this is probably after your doctorate, with the Shaker day camp, the Shaker sports day camp, and that sort of stuff.
Well, the Shaker, I was a camp counselor. At Sussex, I'll go through the camp history so you have it, because that's how a lot of other people know me. I was a camp counselor at Sussex Day Camp, and by the way, we had some pretty famous people that went to camp over there. I'll just share a few. Okay. You guys familiar with the band Widespread Panic?
Yes.
I've heard of them. Yes.
I bet you didn't know that John Bell, their frontman, grew up in Southern Sussex neighborhood.
Wow.
Did not know.
Well, nothing surprises me. We're the arts high school that wasn't the arts high school.
Oh, yeah, that's very correct. But John Bell grew up in Sussex. He ended up graduating from US. I'm still in touch with him. Mm-hmm. He's still with Widespread Panic. Another person that attended our camp was Molly Shannon from Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Who, by the way, was sharing on the Jay Leno show stories from Sussex Day Camp on the Jay Leno show.
Well, I'll have to look that up. Definitely look that up.
Kim Whitley.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Kim Whitley. Also another guy that used to hang around. He never went to the camp there, to my knowledge, was Jim Brickman, the piano player, the musician.
He's a writer. I know the name. Give us some examples of what Jim Brickman.
You're probably speaking of Andy Borowitz.
I was thinking of Brickman. I'd heard of Borowitz, but I'd have to look that up.
Well, Peter Borowitz. Andy Borowitz, who went to Shaker, was also the producer and creator of the TV show Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Right.
Yeah.
And now he
let me into
writes
that.
he writes the Borowitz report for the New Yorker. And Berkman, I'm not familiar with. I don't know, but Jim Brickman was a piano player, and it was actually, I think, been nominated for some Grammy Awards. Has a radio show here in Cleveland now. Was out in L.A. He was in that neighborhood.
I know that name.
So then you mentioned the sports camp, which happened before I got my doctorate. One of the things I noticed is we had a lot of middle school kids that would hang around the playground with nothing to do. And at that point, there was nothing structured. There were no structured recreation programs during the summer for middle school age kids. So I came up with the idea of starting a camp for middle school kids, which was initiated in, I believe the year would have been 79, 80.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I had also directed Mercer Day Camp, and was one of the, at the age of, I wasn't even out of college, and they made me a director of the camp at Mercer, and that's where I knew a lot of kids actually from your years. Scott Drays, the Rich sisters, Molly Sindelar. We could go out,
You know who I associate you with the most, and I just forgot his name. He's a damn it, I just forgot his name. Every time I get on the air, I forget names. Roger Kurtz. That's who I associate with you, and I probably know why, because you're both in the psychology field.
Yeah, Roger Kurtz wasn't happy with me back then because I don't want to get into it back then, but yeah.
Sorry to open up something. I didn't know about
it was
that.
nothing. It's nothing. I teased him a little bit back then, and he kind of hung on to that. There's nothing awful, but Roger used to get teased a lot by the other kids, and I did something that probably was not the right thing to do, encouraging it a little bit. And so, yeah, just being transparent here. But
yeah,
Roger's out in California, I want to say.
I went to Boulevard Day Camp, and one of the best memorable things my parents could have done for me as a middle school student. I wish Ludlow had day camp because, folks like Greg Fuller, Keith Asamono, myself, Richie Milter, we were young ruffians. We got into a lot of trouble. And if we were to do that stuff today, we'd be in juvie hall. Full transparency.
I don't know if we want to go there.
Yeah. So,
well, I wanted to go full circle with Roger, because Roger Kurtz is I don't know if he was undergrad, went to Tulane. My son pitched at Tulane, and Roger called and talked to Ryan about preparing mentally for sports. He's a sports psychologist, and he's worked with Steve Kerr. He's in Los Angeles. He's worked with the Los Angeles Angels, or whatever they're called now, Anaheim Angels, what have you. So he's doing really well out there with his. And I know you're involved with a lot of us as athletes, so I always associate him with you for some reason. So
yeah, and that's kind of a fun memory that a lot of kids I coached have gone on. Nathan Rose, more recent, played baseball at Tulane. Some of my former athletes, one of them, I've had 2 first-round draft picks, but they were not from Shaker. One went to St. Ed's. One was a guy that I coached out in Colorado, John Burke, who was the first pitcher taken in the whole draft, developed an arm. So I've had several kids from one from Shaker. Well, actually, this is interesting. I started the travel baseball program in Shaker back in 1990.
Wow.
And one of the original members, I remember I had 2 kids on the team, the youngest kids and the smallest kids on the team, Ben Simon and Matt Guerrier. Ben Simon went on to play in the National Hockey League. And Matt Guerrero went on for a fairly long career in Major League Baseball with the Minnesota Twins. So they were original members of my first travel baseball team.
Oh, wow. And then
I remember
you referred us to Torrey Roper, who we've had on the show.
Yep.
Yeah, great kid.
Yeah, great guy.
Young
I didn't
man.
really coach him. I just knew him.
Yeah.
But I thought he would have been a great resource for more recent times at Shaker.
Did you have any affiliation with any of the baseball program, like with Hogue or with Heinlein? Did you participate with those coaches?
With who? Who was the Heinlein, and who else did you?
Fred Heinlein, Dennis Hogue when he was the coach. That was the coach.
Well, I knew I was working in the schools when Dennis was the coach, but I really wasn't involved. I was more during the summer and youth baseball.
Mm-hmm.
I was there when had a connection with Buddy Longo when he was coaching.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hogue, I knew he was, I knew him when he was at the high school because we both were working there. Fred Heinlein, got to know him through the years. Actually coached his grandson, Carson Strang, who's now an attorney, but Carson was on my team. Fred used to come to all my games and gave his support for baseball. Interesting thing, here's a little sidelight. We were talking about the beginnings of the Shaker Heights High School hockey team. The athletic department was not happy with the hockey team our first year. Because we were getting huge crowds. We were getting a lot of publicity that they weren't getting. There's a lot of resentment by some of the older coaches. They didn't like it, which was kind of funny because, we were very successful. And by the way, for those who don't know this, our first year in action, we went undefeated and won a state championship.
Oh, wow.
Wow, that's crazy. Where were they playing hockey when they weren't playing? If Shaker did they have a youth hockey program and just not a high school program?
The youth hockey program got started the same year. Most kids were practicing at the Cleveland Skating Club at Northfield. Northfield used to have a skating rink.
I remember that. Yeah, it's now Bass Chevrolet, or was Bass Chevrolet last time I was there, next to Turfside. Yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, Johnny Bass also went to Shaker.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So So were they playing hockey? Were there leagues there at those facilities? And
not until 70, 71.
But how do you get a championship hockey team? How do you do that without
kids were training all over? They were playing all over. They were playing for the Cleveland Muni Hockey Association. They were playing at Northfield. They were playing all over the place.
Okay.
And don't forget, this is another forgotten element of Shaker. Almost every playground had an outdoor skating rink. I don't know if you know that.
I know that Lomond, towards the sledding hill, where it was ditched in, that was built for a skating rink, but it was far and few between. It would have to take a miracle of nature for it to be. Did they fill them up and freeze them, or
they weren't as elaborate as Lomond's, but they were. Mercer even had one back behind where the field, the baseball field. It was a little recessed. They didn't use it very much. They dug it out. There was also a rink, I forget the intersection of Warrington. I want to say Warrington and
Fernway.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ludlow had
there was a rink there.
Off of Onaway. Yeah.
So kids used to, kids were, by the way, back then, as opposed to now, kids were way more independent back then.
Yeah, definitely.
They were playing pickup basketball, pickup baseball, hockey out in the rinks at Lomond, out skating. Well, parents don't let them do that anymore.
When did you see that change, and what do you equate that to? Since you were hands-on at that time, Gabe and I were growing up.
It started in the 80s. It slowly evolved. People, they started with the kids getting abducted, the milk carton thing. And by the way, I could talk about a few very, very frightening murders that took place in Shaker involving kids. But if you don't want to go there, I won't.
No, we go there like later on. We can talk about it. I mean,
It's
But
just weird. Shaker doesn't
but
do anything small. It's always big and dangerous and the most treacherous thing that could ever
like
happen.
like
yeah,
today at 3 a.m. Eric had or is it somebody on a chat had forwarded us, Denny Young, Shakerite, had forwarded
I
an
saw.
article about two people who got shot and killed in Shaker at 3 a.m. this morning off of Shaker Boulevard near Attleboro. House
Yeah,
party.
yeah.
I didn't know about that.
There was someone renting a house there, and it was a company in California. I was just reading some of the notes that people were writing. I don't know if they rented it out as an Airbnb and they had the wrong element in there and two people were shot and they taped off they stopped the green line all day. And yeah, they're still trying to figure out what happened.
For viewers out there, between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. is known as felony hours. Nothing good happens outside the house during felony hours.
And sometimes inside the house too.
That's true too.
Yeah. I guess you should say hide in the basement or something. But I started to see, getting back to the evolution of parents becoming overprotective. It started with the whole milk carton thing. Scaring parents. They started becoming protective. It was all well intended, but they're actually, I believe, doing more damage than good by overprotecting kids. There's a book just written called The Anxious Generation, reviewing research about how this overprotectiveness is actually causing that in the internet. And I won't get into the internet, social media and all, causing massive damage to young people, their levels of anxiety and distress that they're experiencing.
I can see that.
Because when you don't let kids go on their own, they never learn to be independent.
No.
One of the greatest things that kids have always told me was how much fun they loved hanging out at the playgrounds. I did playground supervision at Sussex, and the kids that were hanging around there and worked with Jimmy Malone at the high school and Woodbury, and the kids hanging out there and the relationships that were built. And kids learning to be independent. Well, parents don't let them do that anymore.
Well, we're just talking to Brian Sullivan, and I hope, do you remember Mr. Thompson and Mr. Sullivan? They were the Shaker Rec guys over at Lomond School. And I used to play catch with Mr. Sullivan every day. And we had a relationship, and he remembers me to this day. So
I was at Lomond too. I remember kids bringing me I'd be up there all day, and they'd bring lunch. They'd go bring home a lunch to me. They used to feed me up there. Yeah. So I remember all kinds of kids hanging around there.
When did that go under? When did that stop? And why did that stop? You're the historian.
And when did what stop?
The Shaker Rec guys, the guys with the walkie-talkies that would roll out all the balls after school.
I don't really know the evolution, because when I left in '83, it was still going strong. I don't know when it really completely went away. I think, kids stopped hanging around there. They stopped but I don't know the exact years or dates, so I wouldn't be able to tell you about that. I was gone for 3 or 4 years and really wasn't paying much attention to it when I got back, so I really wouldn't know.
I swear, I think handheld video games and all that type of stuff is what brought people inside, and that's when kids started getting distracted. And
that was part of it. That also caused a lot of angst, the body shaming, the shaming that's occurring on social media, some of the negative stuff, really nasty exchanges that I've actually been familiarized with. One kid from Shaker showed me a string of social media. He got into this thing with two other kids on social media. Thing went on with 80 messages. They were each trying to shut each other up, shut each other down with these awful messages. It was an argument. It ended with one of the kids telling him, "Why don't you just go home and kill yourself?"
Yeah, I've heard that story lots of times. Yeah.
Yeah. The kids don't really mean that they want you to kill yourself. What happens when these arguments go on in social media, and I'm speaking as a psychologist now, they're trying to get the last word.
Mm-hmm.
This will show them, this will show them, this will show. Well, it doesn't. It just keeps going. And finally, that's usually a game ender right there.
Yeah.
They don't really mean that they want the person to go home and kill themselves, but it's awful.
Well, just even being an adult, it's easy to get sucked into those conversations, especially politically. And then you're wondering, I want to say something, I'm getting real angry, and some of the stuff that I want to say, and then I have to catch myself. But then you have to realize what that does to a kid who doesn't really know any better. And with everything that kids have access to, especially, like, if we want to see a Playboy, we'd have to go sneak into Avalon Drugs and, have a lookout or go in your father's, what have you. Now, everything's accessible. Porn's accessible. Kids can gamble. And I heard that's another thing that's causing a lot of depression and a lot of angst among teenagers and kids.
Oh, there's terrible things going on with the gambling right now. Just awful, really bad. A lot of addiction and a lot of, it's ugly. Really, really, really ugly. Some serious problems going on. But the shaming, the drama going on is causing a lot of anxiety and depression amongst kids, and they don't have the awareness to see what they're doing and to realize, knock it off.
Yeah.
I won't argue. I won't get into an argument on social media or texting. It's just, no. It's a great way to communicate for information, but I'm not getting into a discussion with anybody that it turns into an argument. No, I'm done. I'm out. No. Right. And I don't do social media. The only reason I do write for Psychology Day magazine, and they require me to post my articles on Facebook, and that's the only reason I'm on there. I just laugh at the garbage that I see. Oh, by the way, the Shaker kids too, have a name for parents that are posting on social media, on Facebook all the time. They call them Facebook moms. And they laugh at them. They're laughing. I don't think the parents realize, especially when the parents start posting about their kids, bragging about their kids online. The kids hate it.
Yeah.
Well, how about the coaching? I was listening to a podcast, Charles Barkley, and they were talking about the parents, the coaching parents, and how they get so involved and how it becomes like a political game. When did you start seeing that? Was that around when we were playing, or when did that show up?
I think it started showing up at around the same time in education, when the message started getting sent out. You need to be involved with your kid and their education. You need to be more involved, which is that's important. You want to be involved, but nobody really explained how to be involved, constructive involvement. They started getting more and more. So I'll just give you an interesting thing that kind of interweaves what we were just talking about with the internet and parent. I started coaching. My first team was in 1971, summer of 1971. And I can remember, and then I was coaching the younger kids, 9, 10-year-olds for the first 3 or 4 years of my coaching career. We would tell the kids, we've got to practice at Lomond at 10 o'clock Saturday morning. We never talked to the parents. Mm-hmm. There was no internet. There were no group chats. There was no online anything. We told the kids, and they all showed up At 10 a.m. on Saturday morning, they told their parents, we've got to practice. They communicated with their parents. Parents understood, and you could even see it in their body language early on. They would drop their kids off, and you could see, okay, they're yours now.
Mm-hmm.
Not in a bit. And they never hung around the practices. They dropped the kids off, and they'd go do their thing.
Yeah.
Now, a few times I remember coaching recent years, I had to tell a parent to get off the bench where the kids were sitting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't, you talk about bad awareness. Parents have developed very poor boundaries. They're trying to do, it's well-intended. They're trying to be involved and they care, but the lack of awareness. But no, that didn't really start to become a thing. You always had those one or two parents.
Yeah.
But they were like, everybody kind of laughed at them, and they were the rest of the parents. I think it started to change. I want to say I started to see the change, I would say, in the mid to late 1980s.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And do you remember when Mackey's Coach Mackey, who was the Cleveland State coach, his son came to Shaker, and I think in my mind, he was the first recruited basketball player. And then after that, it seemed like Shaker got involved with recruiting these athletes and bringing them into the jurisdiction. And all of a sudden, our sports teams started getting remarkably better. Is there any truth in that? Or is that
recently Shaker teams have gotten progressively worse.
Okay.
One of the things I always used to say about Shaker is back when I was working there and I was in school there, and is they were always competitive. Shaker kids knew how to compete. Other teams might have had better personnel, better rosters, more talent, but Shaker was, boy, those kids knew how to compete. And they were never, well, that's changed. They're not so competitive as they were, and they might have some talent there.
Why is that? Why do you think that is? Is it entitlement, or what do you think that is?
I think it's a little entitlement. I think it's kids, when you're out playing on your own, you learn to fend for yourself. You learn to compete when you're having a playground pickup game. Mm-hmm. They don't do that anymore. And then I think so kids are, their only sports experience really is what they get organized by some adult. And when you've got over-involved parents whining and complaining all the time about the coaches, about the refereeing, the kids learn to whine and complain about everything.
Oh yeah. I was talking on our last podcast, my experience, I had two athletes. They both played college sports. Actually, my daughter played at Cleveland State volleyball. So okay. I always said laughingly, but it was true. Every time my kids left the house, it cost me money. So my kids luckily they played a variety of sports all year round. But a lot of kids, starting at 6 or 8 years old, they get stuck into one sport and they get burn out on the sport, and they get pressured from their parents, and it just becomes like a crab barrel. Everyone's trying to outdo the other parents, and there's all the politics involved, and when you go to the sports teams, like my daughter's volleyball player, you were expected to be trained on a travel team before you have the skills before you reported back for the next season.
Yeah, I don't know if this. I wrote a couple of articles about this, and that were in the Plain Dealer. I wrote an op-ed piece. I don't know if you saw it, about the destruction of youth sports because sports has become a business.
Yes.
They're just trying to sell their product, and then these coaches have turned their sport into a year-round commitment. You're practicing in a gym for baseball and with 40 other kids in the middle of November for a season that won't even start for another 6 months, and the kids are getting burned out. They're losing their love of the sport. So there's a lot of that going on. But yeah, I did a, you can look it up on the Plain Dealer.
Oh, definitely will.
And I think the coaches, somebody just put up a message there that, back then coaching wasn't about making money.
Mm-hmm.
When I was coaching in Shaker, I never made a penny. In fact, I lost money buying stuff. It was costing me. I wasn't making anything out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And but coaching then, that's what everybody was doing. It was all about giving to the community. It was volunteerism. Coaching now has become, everything's been monetized.
Yeah, it's a parlay.
Yeah. Even the travel program I started in Shaker for baseball got monetized by a company. And I'm not saying they're not doing a good job running it, but come on, let's.
You know when I got the first taste I got of this, and I don't know if Gabe, you probably remember this. When Hogue took over the baseball team, he had all these people go out, and then we had these fundraisers even before the team was made. So we sold all this stuff, and being a kid, you think you have influence if you're selling candy or what have you. Then we all got cut, and then you guys, Gabe was a manager on the team. They had the best gear in the world. They had like their bags and helmets with their names on it and their hoodies. I had never seen anything like that. I thought, wow, he really got us. And then that's when I start to see things, in that realm as an entryway for making more money. So Ryan, one of Ryan's coaches before he got to high school in Michigan, just parlayed that. He was the baseball coach, and then he started having lessons, and then it became so lucrative. He quit being the coach and had his own travel team and so forth.
Yeah, you've got that, and then you've got the kids back, probably right around before Hogue. They would use the same uniforms for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, exactly.
And there wasn't. Now everything, the kids are more into the gear than they are into playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these travel teams have 3 or 4 uniforms that they have. It's just really weird. But it's total. The focus has just been totally lost, and it's kind of sad.
So, in your profession at the moment, when you're dealing with kids and who might also be athletes, I mean, what is the common thing that you're helping them trying to work through? Is it anxiety or is it self-esteem issues?
Well, there's several things. One of the things, because of, here's an interesting thing. A lot of kids are dealing with a lot of performance anxiety, burnout. Older kids have a real problem when their sports career ends because their whole life is revolved around it. It's self as context. Their whole identity revolves around their sport. And I don't think a lot of adults recognize the damage they're doing. Kind of an interesting thing. I'll ask parents, what's your priority for your child growing up? What's the priority? Some say family. Some say their education. No one ever mentions sports. No one. But then when I say, oh, family is your priority. So when do you have family meals? Well, that's really tough, with the kids' sports schedules. We don't really have, I can't remember the last time we had a full family dinner except at holiday time because, there's sports schedules. Or I'll say, when was the last time you took a family vacation? Well, that's really tough too because, with their sports schedule. When it comes to education, when does little Gabe do his homework?
Right.
Oh, well, it's tough. He's got to do that late at night because, his hockey practice runs until 9:00. And then he's got baseball practice. So what ends up happening, I'm pointing out, so you're telling me that school or family is the priority for your child, yet everything they don't do their home, everything, your whole life is revolving around their stinking sport.
Mm.
Mhm.
Okay, there's something wrong with that. You're telling me, you're verbalizing me, your priorities are school or family or religion, yet their whole life is revolving around their sport. I'm sorry, there's something wrong with that. I mean, I get it in season. You're playing in season and it's very involved. But when you're talking November baseball,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you're talking, I mean, come on, knock
Yeah.
it off. And then these parents that their kids are like, I use this analogy. A lot of the kids, they all think they all think they're going to be professional athletes.
Mhm.
You're right.
And I say, come on, are you kidding? That's like a 3-year-old girl thinking she's going to be a princess.
Yeah.
Well,
You know?
even as a parent, you get caught up in that. I mean, all the talk around it, all the talk away from the kids, about the upcoming season, and then it's a way to get away from your wife or what have you, to go to a sporting event, and if your kid does something great, it reflects you. I mean, it's intoxicating. I mean, I wasn't that bad of a parent, but where that was concerned, but I really enjoyed those years where my kids were playing.
Well, and it's enjoyable, but parents have to be aware. You said parents, it's really for parents to get caught up in that. Well, parents are actually feeding
They
that
are. They
identity.
are.
They're feeding it, and they don't realize that they're setting their kids up for really hard times when their sports career ends, because 94% of kids, their sports career will end the day they
Mhm.
graduate from high school.
Yeah.
I
And
also
then,
think
Only
about
then
it.
6%, only 6% of kids, according to NCAA data,
Right.
only 6% of kids go on to play college sport at any level.
I mean, I
And
also.
then you've got
Oh,
kids that, I'm playing college, and they a lot of them think, and and here's the other thing that goes hand in hand with that. They're not really thinking about anything outside their sport. And when it comes time to go to college and get a major or get out of college, they never gave a second's thought to what they really wanted to be doing.
yeah.
yeah,
And that's really,
my son's major was revolved around his baseball schedule, of what he was able to do based on his baseball schedule. It wasn't, I don't know if he necessarily wanted to go into marketing, but that's what he had time to fulfill in the classroom based on his baseball schedule.
yeah. Well, there's a local college coach, I'm not going to say what school or what sport, tells his athletes, you guys, if you think you're going to be lawyers and engineers, forget about it. The world needs janitors. You need to trim your college level. You need to change your major so you can spend more time practicing for our team. Are you
And
kidding
then
me?
and then when you get to college, you really find out you better perform. You're not getting the coaching. You perform when you get your chance, because if you're not, there's somebody coming up from JUCO the next year to take your spot.
I
Yeah.
also think about the social economic aspect of this too. And when you break it down between class and race. So when you think about young black athletes and the pressure, for example, like as it relates to the NBA or the NFL, to make it, because there's all this, they're the lotto ticket, so if it's in some communities, like, yeah, it's like the sports or the music business and all the pressure that's put on for that, and not, I wish they would have tools available to them, as we're talking about now, to hopefully deal with that stuff, because I mean, you see it in in our sports today, in a lot of ways. So it's
And,
just.
interconnecting what you just said, the internet, parents, a lot of parents, it's having their kid play a sport is all about their bragging rights.
Yeah, and
putting videos of their kid
Yeah.
playing on social media.
Yeah.
I remember, and bragging because their kid is going to just got a scholarship to Northwest, Eastern, Southern, Central Missouri State Teachers College to play field hockey or something. And the kids posted, a lot of it's about bragging rights. And
it is.
Living through your kid that way is really destructive.
It really is. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. It's easy. It's addictive. It's easy to get caught up in,
Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
is.
I mean, I've even had kids that I coached that were playing sport and had it. They made it to college and really pretty good programs, and they dropped out, and they were afraid to tell me because they'd been their coach. So I didn't want. I said, "Why are you afraid to tell me?" And I said, "I didn't want to disappoint you." You're not disappointing me. I said, "I'm actually proud of you for quitting."
Right.
And they look at me like, "What?" And I said, "Because you made a decision for your life.
Yeah.
You're not doing this for me. You're not doing it for your parents. You're doing it for you. Congratulations."
Yeah. Right on.
And I actually encourage kids to not play college. And let me explain why. If they really, really want to play college sports, I'm never going to be able to talk them out of it. They're good enough to get an offer. But a lot of kids are playing because they don't want to disappoint their parents. They've really had it. You don't know how many kids I've talked to. I don't really want to be going through this anymore, but my mom and dad are invested in it. They've spent so much time. They don't really, they've not because they've gotten burned out, or they want to move on with their life. Yeah. When I see kids move on with their life, I don't mean just quitting. So, they're usually quitting a sport because they want to focus on something else. If they just quit and do nothing, that's not good. But a lot of them are just, their priorities have changed. And a lot of parents act as if their kids are still 8 and 9 years old.
Oh, yeah.
And, but so, yeah, at any rate, I've seen a lot of kids, their sports career ends, and the older they are, the tougher it is. Really, really tough for them to let it go. Really tough. They really struggle with that. And I don't think that's something that parents of younger kids have an awareness of.
Makes me think about the NIL thing in college sports, right? And the fact that athletes can transfer. And so you have like a fifth year senior in college still playing football or something like that. And it's just wild, like folks getting in their last hurrah, or milking it until it's over,
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm only thinking about that because of yesterday. Colorado was playing Kansas State and the Jayhawks, and the announcers were talking about their offensive line and how all of them were like fifth or sixth year seniors.
Yeah,
they came off
I
the
saw
transfer portal.
that.
So you got these like grown men like throwing these like young men off to the side and stuff like that, playing football. But yeah,
not even to think about. A lot of kids are held back a year, so they'll have an advantage in a sports career making the teams. And I also saw this thing. Look for this. It was on during the football games yesterday. Kendrick Perkins has found a way that he's going to exploit this NIL thing. He's got this app where he wants kids to share their money with him. So I don't know what he's guaranteeing them, but of course it's a scheme. It's not a Ponzi scheme, but it's some sort of scheme for him to make money off of these NIL guys.
Well, I really think sports, because of all the things we've discussed, is going to be cannibalizing itself. Mm-hmm. It's going to self-destruct.
In what way? Tell me, what do you see? What's the future? I see a lot of things self-destructing, but sports-wise, let me know.
Well, I see all kinds of different things, happening where people don't think that school sports, if you're going to get recruited, you've got to be playing for really, really elite travel team. So a lot of your better hockey players aren't playing high school hockey. They're playing for a juniors team.
Mm-hmm.
Soccer, that's happening. And I think because it's all about recruiting now. It's all about individualism. Plus, sports are getting very expensive. In high school, you mentioned, Eric, all the gear that they buy, and it's getting expensive for schools to be able to pay for all that. Kids dropping out of sports, quitting because they're just burned out. There's all kinds of factors entering into it. That I think eventually what's going to happen is you're going to start seeing sports at the high school level. You'll start to see them break down. And I think you're already seeing a little bit of it. Schools that used to be very competitive, not so much anymore. Schools really not having a very big roster. Football, that's happening with, small rosters. And so there's a lot of factors entering into it. Financial factors, parental over-involvement, the whole recruiting thing. And it's just deteriorating. Where it will end, where it's going to end up, I have no idea, but it's definitely not headed in a good direction.
The thing that kills me, I was watching either Ohio State or Colorado, and they were giving, I don't bet, but they were giving the betting lines during the game based on the score and where they were heading in real time. So a lot of people, that's another thing I think that has destroyed sport is those fantasy leagues. Everyone's placing money, and they're not. It's all about what that they can get from the event. It's not that they're enjoying the event for the event. It's trying to get rich from the event, trying to make money. I can't stand that. It's just too much.
They kicked Pete Rose out of baseball, and now they're advertising gambling on all their broadcasts.
Exactly.
The irony of that.
Yeah.
Dave, have you read Laura Meckler's book?
No, I remember Laura Meckler, but I never read it.
Okay. Yeah. This podcast in part was inspired by the conversations that Eric and I had after reading the book and stuff. But yeah, I mean, did you see like Little Fires Everywhere or they did a series on that by Celeste Ng and The Battle of Shaker Heights, that film.
Yeah, I didn't see those either.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I think I did see The Battle of Shaker Heights now that you mentioned it, but I never watched
Little Fires Everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should do like an episode specifically about those so-called shaker-centered things. But that's another conversation. But I was just curious about,
What shaker look like to you from your perspective back when we were in school and now? What's most changed about the community, the school?
I think that lots happened. Lots changed since COVID. I just see a lot of deterioration. I think kids were more focused back then. Just seemed to have a better direction.
Yeah.
I feel like I think Shaker, the schools have dropped their standards a little bit. They're trying to do the right thing. They're trying to be supportive, but you don't drop standards. You can be supportive and have high standards. I feel like the schools administratively have dropped standards. I think the kids don't quite seem to be centered on what they want to be doing later in life. I mean, there's always been, Shaker's always had the same problems other schools have with a lot of partying and drugs and drinking and all that kind of thing. But I think the kids were centered more so than they are now. Seem to be more directed with what they want to be doing. And they, it just seems that way. And I think a lot, it's not just Shaker's leadership, by the way. When I say leadership, I meant in the schools.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm hearing from all the schools, it's just, there's just a lot of a letdown of dropping, if here's an example, they had a policy where, well, when you guys didn't turn in an assignment, how many points did you get for that assignment?
Zero.
But they changed it. You get an automatic 50% if you don't turn it in. I mean, come on, are you kidding me?
Yeah. Wow.
How
Like
about
everybody gets a gold star. Fuck that.
Yeah, we're going to give everybody a gold star, whether you did the homework or not. By the way, grades are also very inflated.
Mm-hmm.
They used to grade on a curve. Most of the kids got C's. You had a few A's, a few F's, mostly B, right? Now you get a grade point average before a 3.5 and they think you're mentally handicapped or something.
So what's that attributable to? Is that when they started when they started doing the standardized testing and teachers had to meet a threshold?
I don't know exactly what that's related to. I do know that grades across the boards, not just in Shaker, have gotten very inflated.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know, it seems everybody's getting a 3.5 or a 3.6. So I don't know all the ins and outs of why that happened. Although I do know that, it used to, when a kid, if you got a bad grade on a test, that was on you when you guys were in school. Your parents would get on your case. Now, a lot of times, the parents and the kid it's the teacher's fault. You didn't give me a high enough grade.
Yeah.
They blame the teacher. Everybody's supposed to get an A. I think also a lot of kids are under a lot of pressure. If they don't get an A, the parents treat it like they just failed life.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of pressure on the kids from parents acting like the sky's caving in because their kid didn't get an A on a test, which is putting a lot of pressure on kids. And then I think that kind of washes back to the teachers. They're getting I think teachers get a lot of heat when their students don't get as high of a grade as their parents think they should.
Well, I can speak to being an adjunct professor, and I'm sure Gabe can speak to this. I think students are paying for their diplomas and their grades. They think they're entitled to the grades because they're paying for it. I've been told, and I won't tell what institution I worked at, but I was told to give a gentleman's C when the work wasn't done for a 3-credit course and that sort of thing. And if I don't give it out, then my job is on the line. And I'm complained about, and kids can post about their professor online. And then
professor.
Yeah.
Well, that's happening to teachers too.
Yeah.
And teachers don't want to look bad. I know, our private schools, why are we paying all this money to send our kid to a private school to get them into a good college? So you better give my kid an A so they can get into this college. And then, of course, that makes the school look good.
Mm-hmm.
Because,
I think it's got to be generational because we're coming from, my dad was in World War II. So we're coming from, my parents lived through the Depression and tried to get me into a school system where I could have access to more things than they had. So it was on me to perform, no matter what the environment or what the atmosphere was. I mean, if things got too crazy, my mom would say something, but still, I think it's gotten out of hand. I'm sure
the Greatest Generation, the World War II, and that grew out of a movement in education it was the Progressive Education Movement, headed by Thomas Dewey. And the idea was parents were sending their kids to schools, to private schools, to toughen them up, to give them a difficult circumstance. Like, the
Jesuits.
Los Alamos ranch school where the atom bomb was due. I actually wrote something on this and researched it. People were sending, very wealthy kids, even from the Cleveland community, were sending their kids to Los Alamos, New Mexico at this ranch school to toughen them up.
Mm.
Their rooms were not, they were up in the mountains. Their dorms were not heated. They had to build a fire in their room.
Mm.
They had to raise their own food. They had an animal to care for, a horse or an animal. And this was part of the progressive education movement. People were sending, when parents were sending their kids to private schools right now, it's to be cushy and entitlement. And back then, it was about toughening them up. It was about giving them a challenge. Okay. And that started to deteriorate. In fact, some of the people out of that movement started to complain about some of the schools that were starting, private schools that were starting up in the 1920s and 30s. That was already starting to deteriorate, some of the private day schools. But your boarding schools were to toughen kids up. And I caught the tail end of that. I caught the very tail end of that when I used to go to Culver Military Academy in the summers.
Yeah.
In the research I did, I could see where what they were doing was coming out of. I caught the tail end of it.
I witnessed that when I was in the Army. I joined the Army in 2007, and I was at basic training. So you imagine I'm like one of the oldest recruits. And my drill sergeants, in our off period of time, I mean, they could have been young enough to be like my sons. These guys were 25, 26, taking a break from deployments. That's why they went into drill sergeant school. But they told me, the biggest frustration that they had was being what they called reparenters. So I never forget, Drill Sergeant Jefferson was like, "Hey man, I'm here to train soldiers. I'm not here to be a reparenter." And that always stuck with me because a lot of times there was that thing of like, oh, somebody's mom called, some one of the recruits who might have been like legacy Army called his mom complaining that the drill sergeants didn't give us our winter gear to wear. So the mom would call the base commander and complain, and then they would complain to the drill sergeants, give the recruits their winter gear, and so it's such an irony because this is Army basic training, and there's a element of coddling to your point there.
Yeah, there's a lot of coddling going on, and like I said, parents wanted their kids to go through tough stuff. Kids had to listen.
I've got two. Go ahead. I'm sorry. We're delaying. Let me let you
go
finish.
ahead. And I'm gonna have to. I got about another 10 minutes here. I'm gonna have to go.
Yeah.
Just so you
Okay.
know.
Real quick, these were terms that we didn't hear when we were going to school, but you hear a lot. I even hear it in the workplace. Neurodivergent and ADHD. What comes to mind when you hear those terms?
I don't like those terms because I feel they're predetermining. Okay, let me tell you a story that emanated out of my experience working as a school psychologist in the Shaker schools. Labels can be misleading. You've got 10 ADHD kids, they could all look different. And I think you're robbing somebody of their humanity, and you're robbing somebody of their individuality when you tattoo a label on their forehead. It's not a denial of what's there. If the kid's having trouble paying attention, unfocused, I'm not denying what you're seeing, but to give it a name, let me give you an example of something that taught me a lifelong lesson as a professional. Every 3 years, I don't know what the rules are now, but when I was in the Shaker schools, then every 3 years, any kid in special ed had to be reevaluated to see if they still qualified, to see if they still, and a lot of it was about money because the schools were getting money from the state to support them. The state got to reevaluate. So I would reevaluate. Back then this was in the late 70s, early 80s. It was mostly learning disabilities. So I would reevaluate the kids, and I got into the habit of reviewing the test results with the kids, which a lot of psychologists didn't do. They would do a reeval, write a report, stick it in a file. That was the end of that. So I would say to the kids, well, it looks here, according to the testing, you're still qualifying for learning disability services. And then I would say to high school age kids who, keep in mind, had been getting special ed service in second or third grade, basically their entire educational history. And I would say to them, do you know what a learning disability is? And here's some of the answers I got. Yeah, I'm brain damaged. Yeah, I'm stupid. I'm retarded.
Wow.
Are you kidding me? You went through and basically by definition, if you're learning disabled, it says you're very intelligent, because what defines a learning disability is you're this smart up here, your skills, your reading, math aren't up to what we would expect. So basically it's saying you're very, 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 very bright.
Mm-hmm. I got to ask you this. Now, looking at where this next administration wants to take the Department of Education and where you see education in the United States compared to the rest of the world, what are you seeing? What are the coming trends? What do you see happening?
I'm too scared to even begin to be able to evaluate that. I have no idea. I think what they're trying to do theoretically is to return control. They're trying to return control to at the state and local level rather than the federal level. So that could differ. If that's actually what's going to happen here, things are going to be different from state to state to state, locally. Okay. So in some instances, that could be some of the states might do some positive things. I don't know. I'm not favoring what they're doing, but it's really hard to predict exactly what will be happening with that. It is a little scary.
So do you think, like, hypothetically, like let's take the state of Ohio, let's take Shaker. If Shaker had any, what's that bad word to some audiences, DEI type of programs or initiatives, could theoretically, like, if the state wanted to, they could mandate those things being taken out of Shaker, or
could, and a lot of it's because of funding.
right.
It's just money.
Yeah.
It's not really what's in the best interest of kids. It's money.
Yeah.
So I don't know what, and then, Texas just are going to allow teaching the Bible in school.
Yeah, they just bought a bunch of Trump Bibles. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Trump Bibles, whatever's in there. So I don't know. I mean, things are going to get a little wonky here, so it's hard to predict.
Yeah,
we've already. I mean, I feel the schools have already been. I think the schools have already been hurt by what's already going on. It's not as if this is just going to start. I mean, I think there has been educational deterioration for a long time. And I'm not even necessarily talking about ACT scores or SAT scores or anything like that. It's more about what we're teaching kids to be successful adults, to be responsible adults.
Yeah.
And I think that's already deteriorated for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's hard to say. And
buckle your seatbelt.
Anyways, yeah, fasten your seatbelt, everybody.
Well, Dave, I know you got to go. Well, I'm trying to think a wrap up question for you, because you've covered so much, and I know we could talk.
Who should we have on? Who should we have on next? Who could we get on? You already
I could
said it.
I could probably arrange an interview with Thomas Maudley, who was the Secretary of the United States Navy
Oh,
and
that
went to
would be
Shaker.
great.
Yeah. Did he lived on Daleford, didn't he?
I believe so. Yeah, he went
Yeah.
to. I think he moved in when he was in Woodbury.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but yeah, he's a little bit of a controversial figure because of the whole incident in the Theodore Roosevelt, but that was totally misrepresented. I'll ask him if he would be willing to be on your show.
Oh yeah, that'd be interesting. Yeah, love to have him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who else have you had? I know a couple of them. Who were some of the other folks you've had on?
We've got a
We've
litany.
had
I have to find my calendar. Go ahead.
we've had like Greg Fuller, Denny Young, Clarine Thomas,
John Denny.
John Denny, Dave Richmond, Rob Barrick, Brian Sullivan, Laura McKelvey,
David Embry.
David Embry, Derek Burgess.
Scott Griffin.
Yes, Scott Griffin, who holds the record for most watched episode. And he's not even on social media. He's been,
He got kicked off.
Yeah, Facebook couldn't handle him.
Well,
Tony Peck.
You could do a whole segment where I could tell you a little story about all the people you just listed.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we're hoping to have you on for at least 3 hours.
Yeah,
I feel a little robbed here, you know?
You're like a little holiday fireside chat, you know?
By the way, I didn't send out a link for this to anybody because I'm not an attention seeker.
Right.
So I will be sending out recordings, but whatever.
Yeah.
How many people watched tonight?
At the moment, there are 6 people on. Shout out to those 6 people out there in the internet.
So you would have
How many episodes are we?
You would have had over 1,000 until they
39.
found out I was going to be on.
Well, they'll find out because this thing lives forever out on the internet.
So yeah, and usually what we'll do is tomorrow it will be posted on Spotify and Amazon Music and I think the Podcast Index. So we use this aggregator that will push it out to all the audio platforms, and this is going live to YouTube as we speak right now. So once we're done, it will live live on YouTube on our channel here. So
okay,
yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure. If you want to have me on again, if you can sustain the pain of having me on again, I'm more than willing.
No, it's all good. It's no pain, and people got to realize pain is growth. In order to grow, you have to have a measure.
I can laugh at myself. That's all I can make.
Yeah. Indeed. Well,
thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been great. And there's all kinds of other things we could be. If you want to have me on again, let me know. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Next week will be a mystery guest. It'll be a mystery guest. And so just tune in and find out. You all have a good holiday week ahead with family, friends. You know, you can't change people's opinion at the dinner table. So just enjoy your food and listen and be like water. And that's it. But safe travels. Remember to breathe. Stay hydrated. And look, if that turkey sits out more than a few hours along with that stuffing and all those other things, don't eat it. Okay? Don't eat it. Get food poisoning. You don't want that. People need to realize that. Anyway, Dr. David Udelf.
Hasta luego.
Everybody,
Gracias.
have a great time until next week. And we're out of here.